adjusted his salvage suit's oxygen recycler, and stared at the massive derelict ship floating in the void before him. The Sovereign's crown had been drifting dead in space for over 300 years, its hull by weapon fire and cosmic radiation. Most salvagers wouldn't go near it. The stories about what happened to the last crew were enough to keep even the bravest treasure hunters away. But wasn't most salvagers. He was human, and humans had a reputation for being either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Sometimes both. "Control, this is salvage runner Lucky Strike. Beginning approach to target vessel," spoke into his comm unit, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. "Copy that, Lucky Strike. Remember, you're on your own out there. Station authority ends at the debris field perimeter," came the crackling response from Salvage Control Station. Smiled grimly. That was exactly how he liked it. No corporate oversight, no committee decisions, no safety inspectors breathing down his neck. Just him, his ship, and whatever treasures might be hiding in that ancient hull. The Sovereign's crown had belonged to the Empire back when they ruled this sector of space. They were a proud, warrior race who believed in honor above all else. They also believed that humans were nothing more than primitive scavengers, barely worthy of notice. That attitude had cost them their empire when humanity's expansion finally reached their borders. Now they were scattered across the galaxy, their once mighty fleets reduced to museum pieces and salvage. The Sovereign's crown was supposed to be one of their greatest achievements, a battleship so advanced that it could take on entire fleets single-handed. According to the records, it had done exactly that during the final days of the human war. Guided his small salvage ship closer to the massive derelict. The Lucky Strike was barely 100 meters long, while the Sovereign's crown stretched over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. It was like a minnow approaching a whale. As he drew nearer, could see the damage more clearly. Massive holes had been blown through the hull, and entire sections were missing. Twisted metal jutted out like broken bones. But despite the damage, the ship's basic structure remained intact. More importantly, its cargo holds and valuable systems might still be salvageable. "Beginning hull scan," muttered to himself, activating his ship's sensors. The readings that came back made his eyes widen. The ship's power core was still active, though running at minimal levels. That was impossible. Nothing could run for 300 years without maintenance. Unless the stories were true. According to legend, the Sovereign's crown hadn't just been a warship. It had been a living ship, bonded to a creature known as a Star Sovereign, a massive, ancient being that could survive in the vacuum of space. They had supposedly tamed one of these creatures and built their greatest ship around it, creating a vessel that was part machine, part living organism. Most people dismissed the stories as propaganda, designed to make their enemies fear them. But the power readings suggested otherwise. Either the ship had the most advanced power systems in galactic history, or something alive was still keeping it running. Docked his ship to what looked like a maintenance airlock on the Sovereign's crown's lower hull. The docking clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk, and he began the process of equalizing pressure between the two vessels. "Atmosphere detected in target vessel," his computer announced. "Warning, atmospheric composition unknown. Recommend full environmental protection." "Already wearing my lucky suit," replied, patting his environmental gear. The suit was an older model, but it had kept him alive through dozens of dangerous salvages. He trusted it more than the fancy new gear that corporate salvagers used. The airlock cycled and stepped into the Sovereign's crown for the first time. Emergency lighting flickered along the corridor walls, casting eerie shadows that danced with each step. The air had a strange, sweet smell that reminded him of flowers, though he couldn't identify the specific type. The corridor stretched away in both directions, curving slightly with the ship's hull. Chose to go left, toward what his scans indicated were the cargo holds. If he was lucky, he'd find some intact technology that he could sell to collectors. If he was very lucky, he might find something that would set him up for life. As he walked, noticed that the ship didn't feel dead. The walls hummed with a subtle vibration, and the lights responded to his presence, growing brighter as he approached and dimming behind him. It was as if the ship was aware of him, tracking his movement through its corridors. "Just automated systems," he told himself. "Very advanced automated systems." But deep down, he wasn't sure he believed it. The first cargo hold was a disappointment. It had been stripped bare, probably by the ship's own crew before whatever disaster had claimed them. The second hold was the same, was beginning to think his information had been wrong when he reached the third hold. The door was sealed, marked with warning signs in the flowing script of the language. Had learned enough during his salvaging career to make out the general meaning. Authorized personnel only, Sovereign's beast, extreme danger. Sovereign's beast, repeated slowly. Now that's interesting. He connected his portable computer to the door's control panel and began working on the access codes. It took nearly an hour, but eventually the ancient lock gave way. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a chamber unlike anything had ever seen. The hold was enormous, easily large enough to house a small starship. But instead of being filled with cargo, it contained what looked like a garden. Bioluminescent plants covered the walls and ceiling, pulsing with soft, blue-green light. The air was thick with moisture and rich with oxygen. And in the center of it all, coiled like a sleeping dragon, was the largest creature had ever seen. The Star Sovereign was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its body was serpentine, covered in scales that shifted color from deep blue to brilliant silver as the bioluminescent light played across them. Each scale was as large as hand, and the creature's body was easily 50 meters long from head to tail. As stepped into the chamber, the creature's eyes opened. They were the color of molten gold, ancient and intelligent. The Star Sovereign looked at him for a long moment, then let out a sound that was part growl, part musical note. The walls of the chamber resonated with the sound and felt it in his bones. "Easy there, big fellow," said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature's head rose slowly and could see that it was definitely not in good health. Its scales were dull in places, and several areas showed signs of old injuries that had never properly healed. Worse, the creature was thin, much thinner than it should be for something its size. Had seen enough animals to recognize starvation when he saw it. The Star Sovereign was slowly dying of hunger. "How long has it been since you ate?" asked, though he didn't expect an answer. To his surprise, images suddenly flooded his mind. He saw the ship in its glory days, with hundreds of crew members tending to the Star Sovereign's needs. He saw the creature being fed massive quantities of rare minerals and exotic energy sources. And he saw the final battle, when the ship was crippled and the crew killed, leaving the Star Sovereign alone and abandoned. The images faded, leaving staggering. The creature had somehow shared its memories with him, showing him exactly what had happened. 300 years, whispered. "You've been alone for 300 years. The Star Sovereign made that musical growling sound again and felt a wave of profound sadness wash over him. The creature wasn't just hungry, it was lonely. It had been the heart of this ship, bonded to its crew, and now it was dying alone in the dark. Looked around the chamber again, this time with a salvager's eye. The bioluminescent plants were clearly artificial, designed to provide oxygen and basic nutrients. But they weren't enough to sustain a creature this size. The Star Sovereign needed real food, and soon. "The question is," said to himself, "what does a space dragon eat?" The creature's memories had shown him glimpses of its feeding, but the details were unclear. Some kind of crystalline substance that glowed with inner fire. Energy-rich minerals that could only be found in certain types of asteroids. Things that would be incredibly expensive to obtain, even if could figure out exactly what they were. Was still pondering the problem when his suit's proximity alarm chimed. Something was approaching his ship. "This is corporate salvage vessel profit margin," a voice crackled over his comm. "Unknown salvager, you are operating in violation of corporate salvage charter 447B. Withdraw immediately or face prosecution." Cursed under his breath. Corporate salvagers. They always showed up after the dangerous work was done, ready to claim the profits for themselves. Technically, he had as much right to be here as they did. Salvage rights in this sector operated on a first-come, first-served basis. But corporate lawyers had ways of making independent salvagers disappear into legal paperwork. "This is independent salvager aboard the Lucky Strike," he replied. "I have valid salvage rights to this vessel. Check your records." "Mister, your reputation precedes you," came the response. "However, this particular vessel has been declared a hazardous site by the Galactic Safety Commission. Independent salvagers are not qualified to handle Class A hazards." Looked at the Star Sovereign, which had been listening to the exchange with what seemed like understanding. The creature's golden eyes were fixed on, as if waiting to see what he would do. "Hazards," said into his comm. I don't see any hazards here, just an old, empty ship. Our sensors indicate the presence of a large life form aboard that vessel. For your own safety, we strongly recommend immediate withdrawal. The corporate ship was getting closer. Could see it on his scanner, a sleek, modern vessel bristling with cutting lasers and mining equipment. Once they got aboard the Sovereign's crown, they'd have no trouble claiming salvage rights. They'd also have no qualms about destroying anything they considered dangerous, including the Star Sovereign. Made a decision that would have seemed crazy to anyone who knew him. He was a practical man, a survivor who looked out for himself first and foremost. But something about the ancient creature's loneliness touched him. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be alone in the vastness of space. "Computer, prepare for emergency undocking," commanded. "Warning, undocking while aboard target vessel will result in abandonment of salvage claim," his ship's computer replied. "Override accepted. Execute emergency undocking on my mark." Turn to the Star Sovereign. "Listen to me, big fellow. Those people coming here won't treat you like the magnificent creature you are. They'll see you as a specimen to be studied or a threat to be eliminated. But I might be able to help you if you're willing to trust a foolish human." The creature's head tilted and felt a gentle presence in his mind. Not invasive like before, just a soft touch that seemed to be asking a question. "I'm going to try to find you food," said. "Real food, the kind you need. It might take me a while and it's going to be dangerous, but I give you my word I'll come back." The Star Sovereign studied him for a long moment, then slowly lowered its great head until it was nearly touching his outstretched hand. The creature's scales were warm and could feel the slow, steady pulse of its heartbeat. Images flowed between them again, but these were different. Saw himself as the Star Sovereign saw him, a small, fragile creature who nonetheless burned with determination and compassion. He saw his own face reflected in the creature's ancient eyes and realized that the Star Sovereign was offering him something precious: trust. "I won't let you down," promised. He turned and ran back toward his ship, his mind already working on the problem. He needed to research Star Sovereign dietary requirements, find sources for whatever exotic materials the creature needed, and somehow get back here before the corporate salvagers figured out what they were dealing with. It was an impossible task. No sane person would even attempt it. But then again, had never claimed to be entirely sane. He was human, after all, and humans had a long history of attempting impossible things. As the Lucky Strike undocked and pulled away from the Sovereign's crown, watched the corporate salvage vessel move in to take his place. They would board the ancient ship, catalog its contents, and eventually discover the Star Sovereign. When they did, wanted to be ready. He had a space dragon to save, and he was running out of time. The journey back to Salvage Control Station gave time to think. He pulled up every database entry he could find about Star Sovereigns, cross-referencing them with historical records and xenobiology reports. Most of it was contradictory or obviously false, but slowly a picture began to emerge. Star Sovereigns were ancient creatures, possibly older than galactic civilization itself. They fed on exotic matter, crystallized dark energy, quantum foam, and other substances that existed at the intersection of science and magic. They had learned to synthesize these materials using advanced technology, creating a symbiotic relationship that benefited both species. But the knowledge of how to create Star Sovereign food had died with the Empire. The few remaining were scattered and bitter, unlikely to share their secrets with a human salvager. Was still researching when he received an unexpected message. The transmission was encoded with military-grade encryption, and the sender's identity was masked. But the voice that spoke when decoded the message was unmistakably. "Human salvager," the voice said, each word precisely enunciated despite the speaker's obvious age. "I am told you have encountered something that should not exist, something that my people thought was lost forever." The transmission continued. "If you truly wish to help the last sovereign, meet me at the coordinates I am sending. Come alone and tell no one. Time grows short for both our species, and perhaps together we can prevent a tragedy that has waited 3 centuries to unfold." Stared at the coordinates for a long time. Meeting an unknown alien in deep space was exactly the kind of stupid risk that got independent salvagers killed. But if there was even a chance that this mysterious could help the Star Sovereign, he had to take it. He changed course, heading for a rendezvous with destiny, and hoping that his foolish human compassion wouldn't get him killed. Behind him, the sovereign's crown grew smaller in the distance, carrying its ancient passenger toward an uncertain fate. The corporate salvagers would have the ship to themselves for now, but intended to return. He'd made a promise to a dying creature, and humans were known for keeping their word. Even when it seemed impossible, the coordinates led to a small asteroid field on the edge of the system. Ancient mining platforms drifted between the rocks, their lights long since dead. It was the kind of place where people went when they wanted to disappear from the galaxy's attention. Ship sensors detected another vessel hiding in the shadow of a large asteroid. The ship was old but well-maintained, with the distinctive curved lines of design. It was small enough to be operated by a single person, which suggested his mysterious contact was traveling alone. "Unknown vessel, this is the Lucky Strike," broadcast on a secure channel. "I'm here for our appointment." "Welcome, human," came the reply. The voice was even more precise in real-time communication, carrying the formal cadence that all seemed to use when speaking other languages. "I am Morin, last keeper of the sovereign arts. Please dock with my vessel. We have much to discuss." The docking process was smooth, suggesting that Morin was an experienced pilot despite his age. When the airlocks connected, found himself face-to-face with unlike any he had encountered before. Most were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and elaborate facial markings that indicated their clan and status. Morin was different. He was shorter than average, with deep lines around his eyes and hands that showed the wear of manual labor. His traditional robes were patched and worn, and his facial markings had faded with age. But his eyes burned with an intensity that made step back involuntarily. These were the eyes of someone who had seen empires fall and refused to give up hope. "You are younger than I expected," Morin said, studying with those piercing eyes. "And your reputation suggests you are motivated primarily by profit, yet you abandoned a valuable salvage claim to help a creature you had never seen before. Why?" Considered his answer carefully. Valued honesty above almost everything else, but they also respected strength and determination. "Because it was the right thing to do," said finally. "The Star Sovereign has been alone for 300 years. No living thing should suffer like that." Morin's expression didn't change, but thought he saw approval in the alien's eyes. "A simple answer," Morin said. "Perhaps too simple, but sometimes the simplest answers are the truest. Follow me, human. Let me show you what you have stumbled into." The ship was larger inside than it appeared from the outside, with multiple levels connected by smooth ramps. The interior was decorated with intricate carvings and what looked like living crystal formations that pulsed with soft light. Morin led to a central chamber that served as both library and laboratory. Crystalline data storage devices lined the walls, and complex equipment hummed quietly in the corners. But what caught attention was the large display screen showing detailed images of star sovereigns. "These are the last records of my people's greatest achievement," Morin said. "The bonding of the sovereign species with our finest ships. For 5,000 years, this partnership allowed us to explore the galaxy and defend our territory against any threat." The images showed star sovereigns in their prime, magnificent creatures swimming through space as easily as fish moved through water. Could see how they had been integrated into ships, their bodies forming the core of vessels that were part machine, part living organism. "They were beautiful," said quietly. "They were magnificent," Morin corrected. "And they were dying even before your species encountered ours. The materials they require for sustenance became increasingly rare as the galaxy aged. We learned to synthesize what they needed, but the process was complex and energy-intensive." The alien moved to another section of the chamber, where a smaller display showed molecular diagrams that hurts eyes to look at. "Star sovereigns feed on quantum crystallized dark matter," Morin explained. "It exists naturally only in the hearts of dying stars and certain types of black holes. Obviously, these are not practical feeding grounds. My ancestors learned to create synthetic versions using technology that your scientists would call impossible." "But you can teach me how to make it?" asked hopefully. Morin's expression grew sad. "No, human. I am the last keeper of this knowledge, and even I possess only fragments. The complete died with the great libraries of Prime. What I have might sustain a star sovereign for a few months, no more." Felt his heart sink. He had come so far, risked so much, only to learn that the Star Sovereign was doomed anyway. However, Morin continued, there may be another option, a dangerous one but possible. The alien called up a star chart showing a region of space didn't recognize. At its center was a swirling mass of colors that seemed to shift even as he watched. The nexus of storms, Morin said, a spatial anomaly that has existed since before recorded history. My people's legends speak of it as the birthplace of the star sovereigns, where natural quantum crystals can still be found. But the region is incredibly dangerous. Ships that enter the nexus are often never seen again. Often isn't always, pointed out. True, and there are records of successful expeditions, though they are rare. The last confirmed success was over 800 years ago, conducted by a joint human exploration team. Looked at the swirling anomaly on the screen. It didn't look like anything he'd ever seen before, but then again, he specialized in going places other people were afraid to visit. What made that expedition successful? He asked. Cooperation, Morin said simply. The humans provided adaptability and innovative thinking. They provided knowledge and experience. Neither species could have succeeded alone. The implication was clear. Morin was offering to join him on what might very well be a suicide mission. Why would you risk your life for this? Asked. You barely know me, and star sovereigns aren't even your species. Morin was quiet for a long moment, studying the images of the magnificent creatures they were trying to save. Because I am the last, he said finally. The last keeper of ancient knowledge, the last guardian of my people's greatest partnership. When I die, thousands of years of wisdom will die with me. But if we can save the last sovereign, if we can find a way to feed it and help it survive, then perhaps something of my people's legacy will endure. The alien turned to face directly. And because I have spent 30 years watching my people's achievements crumble into dust while I stood powerless to stop it, this may be my last chance to do something meaningful with my life. Understood that feeling all too well. He had spent his own life scavenging the remains of dead civilizations, picking through the bones of vanished greatness. The chance to save something magnificent, to preserve life instead of just cataloging death, was too precious to pass up. All right, said, what do we need to know about this Nexus place? Morin's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Everything and nothing, human. The Nexus follows no natural laws. Inside its boundaries, space and time behave according to their own whims. Navigation is by intuition rather than instruments. Survival depends on adaptation and quick thinking. Sounds like my kind of place, said with more confidence than he felt. Perhaps it is. Your species has a reputation for thriving in impossible situations. But first, we must return to your star sovereign. The corporate salvagers will have discovered it by now, and they will not treat it with the respect it deserves. The return journey to the sovereign's crown took 6 hours, during which Morin shared what knowledge he could about star sovereign biology and behavior. The creatures were highly intelligent, capable of complex emotion and abstract thought. They formed deep bonds with their partners and could live for thousands of years under the right conditions. The one you found is old, Morin explained. Perhaps the oldest of its kind still alive. If we can save it, we save not just a life but an entire lineage of knowledge and experience. When they arrived at the derelict ship, they found the corporate salvage vessel still docked to the hull. But something was wrong. The ship's lights were flickering erratically, and there was no response to communication attempts. Scan for life signs, ordered his ship's computer. Multiple human life signs detected aboard target vessel, the computer reported. However, readings are irregular, recommend caution. And Morin suited up and made their way aboard the Sovereign's crown. The first thing noticed was the smell. The sweet floral scent was stronger now, almost overwhelming even through his suit's filters. They found the corporate salvage team in the corridor outside the Star Sovereign's chamber. 5 humans in expensive salvage gear stood perfectly still, their eyes closed and expressions peaceful. They were breathing normally and showed no signs of injury, but they didn't respond to any stimulus. Fascinating, Morin said, running a scanner over one of the motionless figures. They appear to be in some kind of trance state. Their neural activity is highly elevated but focused in areas associated with memory and emotion. The Star Sovereign did something to them. Perhaps, or perhaps they did something to themselves. Star Sovereigns are telepathic, but they are also empathic. They can sense and share emotions across vast distances if these humans approached it with hostile intent. Didn't need the explanation finished. He had felt the Star Sovereign's profound loneliness when he first encountered it. If the creature had shared 3 centuries of isolation and hunger with the corporate team, it was no wonder they had been overwhelmed. The chamber itself was in chaos. The corporate team had set up industrial scanning equipment throughout the space, and several of the bioluminescent plants had been damaged or destroyed. The Star Sovereign lay coiled in the center of the room, but its golden eyes were dim and its breathing was labored. "They've been torturing it," said, anger rising in his voice. "Look at all this equipment. They've been probing it, scanning it, treating it like a specimen." Morin approached the great creature slowly, speaking in the flowing language of his people. The Star Sovereign's eyes focused on him and felt a wave of recognition pass between them. The alien and the ancient creature regarded each other for a long moment, communicating in ways that transcended words. "It remembers me," Morin said softly. "Not personally, but it remembers my people. We shared a bond that went deeper than language or culture. We understood each other." The Star Sovereign made its musical growling sound, but the notes were weak and discordant. Even to untrained ear, the creature sounded like it was dying. "How long does it have?" asked. "Days, perhaps weeks," Morin replied after consulting his scanner. "The stress of this encounter has accelerated its decline. If we are going to help it, we must act immediately." Looked around the damaged chamber, at the unconscious corporate salvagers, at the dying creature that had touched his heart with its loneliness. The smart thing would be to walk away. The nexus of storms sounded like a death trap, and even if they succeeded in finding quantum crystals, there was no guarantee they could get them back in time to save the Star Sovereign. But had never been accused of being smart. He was human, and humans had a reputation for attempting impossible rescues. "What do we need to do?" he asked. Morin began disconnecting the corporate team's equipment, his movements gentle but efficient. "First, we must move the Sovereign to a more suitable environment. My ship has a modified cargo hold that can sustain it temporarily. Then we must gather supplies for the journey to the Nexus." "What about them?" indicated the unconscious humans. "They will recover in a few hours, once they are no longer in direct contact with the Sovereign's emotional field. But they will remember everything they felt. Perhaps that experience will make them wiser." Hoped so, but he doubted it. Corporate types had a way of rationalizing even the most profound experiences when money was involved. The process of moving the Star Sovereign was complex and delicate. The creature was weak, but it seemed to understand what they were trying to do. With infinite care, it allowed itself to be guided through the ship's corridors to the docking bay where Morin's vessel waited. This cargo hold had been modified with environmental controls that could replicate the conditions in the creature's original chamber. Bioluminescent panels provided familiar light, and atmospheric processors maintained the perfect balance of gases that Star Sovereigns required. As the great creature settled into its temporary home, felt its gratitude wash over him like a warm wave. The Star Sovereign was still dying, but at least it was no longer alone. "Now comes the difficult part," Morin said as he sealed the cargo hold. "We must reach the Nexus of Storms, navigate its chaotic interior, locate quantum crystals of the proper resonance frequency, and return here before our passenger succumbs to starvation, all while avoiding the various hazards that have claimed countless ships over the centuries." "When you put it like that, it sounds almost impossible," said. "Almost," Morin agreed, "but not quite, and impossible odds have never stopped humans before." Smiled grimly. "No, they haven't. When do we leave?" "Immediately. Every moment we delay brings the Sovereign closer to death." As the 2 ships undocked from the ancient derelict and headed toward the unknown dangers of the Nexus, couldn't help but think about the choice he had made. A few days ago, he had been a simple salvager looking to make a quick profit. Now he was embarking on a desperate mission to save a creature that most people would consider a monster. It was exactly the kind of foolish, impossible thing that humans were famous for attempting. And maybe, just maybe, that foolishness would be enough to save a life that had endured for. The Nexus of Storms awaited, swirling with ancient mysteries and deadly secrets, but was no longer facing it alone. He had an ally who understood the creature they were trying to save, and somewhere behind them, a Star Sovereign whose trust gave him strength. It was time to see if a foolish human and an old could accomplish the impossible. The journey to the Nexus of Storms took 3 days through hyperspace, during which learned more about star sovereigns than he had ever imagined possible. Morin proved to be a patient teacher, sharing knowledge that had been passed down through generations of keepers. Your species believes that intelligence requires a brain, Morin explained as they sat in the modified cargo hold, watching the star sovereign rest. But the sovereigns think with their entire body. Every scale contains neural clusters that process information. They experience the universe in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Watch the great creature's breathing, noting how the bioluminescent patterns on its scales pulsed in rhythm with its heartbeat. Even in its weakened state, the star sovereign was magnificent. "How did your people first make contact with them?" asked. "By accident," Morin replied. "A exploration ship was caught in a gravitational anomaly and pulled into a region of space where natural quantum crystals formed. The ship was damaged and drifting when a young star sovereign approached them. Instead of attacking, it began to repair their vessel." The old alien's eyes grew distant as he recalled the ancient story. The sovereign could manipulate matter at the quantum level, restructuring the ship's hull and power systems. In exchange, they shared their food and water. It was the beginning of the greatest partnership in galactic history. "What happened to end it?" "Time," Morin said sadly. "The natural sources of quantum crystals became depleted. We learned to create synthetic versions, but the process required massive amounts of energy and rare materials. When the war with your people began, we couldn't spare the resources. One by one, our sovereign partners died of starvation." Felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Humanity's expansion into space had been driven by necessity. Their home systems were overcrowded and resource-depleted. But the cost in terms of lost knowledge and extinct partnerships had been enormous. "I'm sorry," said quietly. "Do not apologize for the actions of your ancestors," Morin replied. "Every species does what it must to survive, but perhaps together we can prevent this particular tragedy from reaching its conclusion." The star sovereign stirred, lifting its great head to look at them. Felt a gentle touch in his mind, not invasive but curious. The creature was learning to recognize his mental signature, growing comfortable with his presence. "It trusts you," Morin observed. "That is remarkable. Sovereigns are naturally cautious around strangers. They must sense something in you that speaks to their nature." Wasn't sure what that might be. He was just a salvager who had stumbled into a situation far beyond his understanding. But as he looked into the star sovereign's golden eyes, he felt a connection that transcended species and language. On the morning of the 3rd day, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus of Storms. His first glimpse of the anomaly left him speechless. The region stretched across several light years, filled with swirling clouds of energy that shifted through colors that had no names. Lightning crackled between massive formations that might have been gas clouds or might have been something else entirely. "Sensors are useless here," Morin warned as they approached the boundary. "The Nexus interferes with all forms of electromagnetic radiation. Navigation must be done by instinct and visual reference points." "How do we find the crystals in all that chaos?" "The Sovereigns will guide us. They can sense quantum crystal formations from great distances. Our passenger may be weak, but its senses are still functional." As they crossed into the Nexus, felt reality shift around them. The stars disappeared, replaced by the swirling chaos of the storm. His instruments went wild for a moment, then shut down entirely. The only light came from the energy formations dancing outside their viewports. "Stay calm," Morin advised. "The Nexus responds to strong emotions. Fear can create dangerous manifestations." Tried to relax, but it wasn't easy. The space around them seemed to pulse and writhe with a life of its own. Shapes formed and dissolved in the energy clouds. Sometimes they looked like faces, sometimes like vast creatures moving through dimensions that human eyes couldn't quite perceive. The star sovereign began to sing. The sound filled both ships, a hauntingly beautiful melody that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space around them. Felt the music in his bones, in his blood, in the electrical patterns of his brain. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. "It's calling to its own kind," Morin explained, his voice filled with wonder. "There are others here, sleeping in the deep places where quantum crystals form. Our sovereign is asking for their help." The response came as an echo, distant at first, then growing stronger. Other voices joined the song, creating harmonies that made soul ache with their beauty. The energy storms around them began to shift, forming patterns that suggested a path through the chaos. "Follow the music," Morin said. "The sleeping sovereigns will guide us to what we seek." Engaged his ship's engines, flying by instinct rather than instruments. The Star Sovereign's song grew stronger, and the path through the energy storms became clearer. They passed formations that physics, crystalline structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, fields of pure mathematics given physical form. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, they emerged into a region of relative calm. Here, the energy storms formed a vast spiral around a central point where something impossible floated in the vacuum. It was a garden of crystals, each one the size of a building and glowing with inner fire. They grew from what appeared to be a small asteroid, but could see that the rock itself was alive, covered in the same bioluminescent patterns that decorated Star Sovereign scales. "A nursery," Morin breathed. "This is where young sovereigns are born and raised until they're large enough to survive in normal space." The crystals were beautiful beyond description, each one containing swirling galaxies of light that seemed to exist in perfect harmony. But as they drew closer, could see movement among the formations. Shapes that were unmistakably Star Sovereigns, though much smaller than their passenger. "There are dozens of them," said in amazement. "How is this possible?" "The nexus exists outside normal space-time," Morin explained. "Time moves differently here. These young ones may have been growing for centuries, or they may have been born yesterday, but they are the future of their species if we can find a way to sustain them." The adult sovereigns living in the Crystal Garden had noticed their approach. 3 magnificent creatures, each one over 100 meters long, glided through space toward them. Their scales shimmered with colors that shifted and flowed like living auroras. Felt their minds touch his, alien intelligences vast and ancient, but not hostile. They were curious about the small ships that had found their hidden sanctuary, especially about the dying sovereign in Morin's cargo hold. Images flooded consciousness. He saw the history of the sovereign species, stretching back millions of years. He saw their first tentative contacts with younger species, the partnerships they had formed, the gradual decline as the galaxy aged and their food sources became scarce. And he saw hope, the possibility of renewal, of finding new sources of sustenance, of partnerships with species that could help them adapt to a changing universe. One of the adult sovereigns approached Morin's ship and began to sing. The melody was different from their passenger's song, deeper, more complex, filled with harmonics that spoke of wisdom accumulated over. The dying sovereign responded weakly, its own voice barely audible. "They're communicating," Morin said unnecessarily. "The elder is sharing knowledge, telling our sovereign how to survive in this new age." Watched in fascination as the 2 creatures' scales began to pulse in synchronized patterns. Information was being transferred at a rate that would make human computers seem slow by comparison. But the exchange was taking a toll on their already weakened passenger. The Star Sovereign's song was growing fainter, its movements more sluggish. "We need those crystals now," said urgently. "Patience," Morin replied. "The elders must decide if we are worthy of their gift." The largest of the adult sovereigns turned its attention too. He felt the weight of its scrutiny, an intelligence that had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations examining his mind and soul. The creature was looking for something, some quality that would determine whether humanity could be trusted with the secrets of sovereign survival. Didn't try to hide anything. He let the creature see his memories of finding their passenger, his decision to help despite the risks, his determination to save a life even if it cost him everything. He showed the sovereign his species' capacity for both cruelty and compassion, their tendency to destroy beautiful things and their equal tendency to sacrifice everything to preserve them. The examination seemed to last forever, but finally the great creature pulled back from his mind. It sang a single, pure note that resonated through the crystal garden. The younger sovereigns responded immediately, their scales brightening as they began to move among the quantum crystal formations. "They're harvesting crystals for us," Morin said with obvious relief. "The elders have judged us worthy." But the process wasn't simple. The crystals couldn't just be broken off. They had to be carefully prepared, their quantum structures aligned to match the specific needs of the dying sovereign. watched in amazement as the young creatures worked with delicate precision, their scales manipulating matter at the subatomic level. While they waited, the eldest sovereign continued its communication with their passenger. Could see the dying creature growing stronger as knowledge flowed between them, not physical strength, but spiritual renewal. It was learning that its species was not extinct, that there was still hope for the future. This is what they needed, Morin said quietly. Not just food, but purpose, a reason to live beyond mere survival. The crystal harvesting took several hours, during which had plenty of time to observe the garden and its inhabitants. He began to understand why the Nexus was so dangerous to normal ships. The space here operated according to rules that human science couldn't explain. Matter and energy behaved according to the will of its inhabitants, shaped by thought and emotion as much as physics. But the young sovereigns navigated it effortlessly, their minds attuned to the quantum fluctuations that governed their environment. They were living proof that intelligence could take forms humanity had never imagined. Finally, the harvest was complete. A dozen perfectly prepared quantum crystals floated in a containment field generated by the young sovereigns. Each crystal pulsed with energies that made instruments scream warnings about impossible radiation signatures. The eldest sovereign approached their ships one final time, its mind touching both and Morin. This time, the communication was more complex, not just images, but concepts and emotions that transcended language. Understood that they were being entrusted with more than just food for their passenger. They were being given the knowledge necessary to synthesize quantum crystals, to establish a sustainable food source for sovereigns in normal space. But the gift came with responsibility. They must use this knowledge wisely, sharing it only with those who would treat the sovereigns with respect. "We understand," said aloud, though he wasn't sure if the creatures could understand human speech. "We'll protect them." The eldest sovereign's response came as a wave of approval tinged with ancient sadness. It had seen too many species come and go, too many partnerships end in betrayal or extinction. But perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps humanity and the surviving could help the sovereigns find a new place in the galaxy. The journey back through the Nexus was easier with the elders guiding them. The energy storms parted before their ships, creating a clear path to normal space. As they emerged from the anomaly, felt the familiar sensation of his instruments coming back online. "Sensors detect multiple ships approaching," his computer announced. "Configuration suggests military vessels." Cursed under his breath. While they had been in the Nexus, someone had been busy. 3 heavy cruisers were moving to intercept them, their weapons already powered up. "This is Admiral Sarah of the Human Space Force," came a transmission. "Unknown vessels, you are operating in a restricted area. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Recognized the name. Admiral was his older sister, the family member who had joined the military while he chose the freedom of independent salvaging. She was tough, competent, and absolutely incorruptible. She was also the last person wanted to deal with while carrying illegal alien technology and a dying star sovereign. "Sarah, he transmitted back. This is not a good time for a family reunion." The surprise in his sister's voice was evident even over the calm. "What the hell are you doing out here, and why are you traveling with a vessel?" "It's complicated," replied. "Can we talk privately?" There was a long pause. Could imagine his sister weighing her options, family loyalty against military duty, curiosity against protocol. "You have 5 minutes," she said finally. "Then I'm bringing you in for questioning." Quickly explained the situation, leaving out the more sensitive details about quantum crystals and hidden sovereign nurseries. He focused on the humanitarian aspect, a dying creature that needed help, an opportunity to preserve something magnificent that would otherwise be lost forever. "You're asking me to ignore military protocols to help you save an alien monster," Sarah said when he finished. "I'm asking you to help me save a life," corrected, "the same way you would for any other endangered species." Another long pause. Held his breath, knowing that his sister's decision would determine whether their mission succeeded or failed. 24 hours, Sarah said finally. "You have 24 hours to complete whatever humanitarian mission you think you're on. After that, I report this encounter according to regulations." "Thank you, Sarah." "Don't thank me yet. And when this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about your life choices." The military ships moved aside, allowing and Morin to continue toward the Sovereign's crown, but knew they were being monitored every step of the way. His sister might have given them a temporary reprieve, but she wouldn't hesitate to act if she thought they posed a threat. "Your family relationships are as complicated as ours," Morin observed. "You could say that," replied grimly. "But at least we have some time. Let's get these crystals to our passenger before someone decides to ask more difficult questions." The race against time was just beginning, and could only hope that 24 hours would be enough to save a life that had endured for. Behind them, the nexus of storms swirled with its ancient secrets, while ahead lay the uncertain challenge of keeping a dying star sovereign alive in a galaxy that had forgotten how to nurture such magnificent creatures. But for the first time since this adventure began, felt genuinely hopeful. They had the crystals, they had the knowledge, and they had allies in the most unexpected places. Now all they had to do was prove that a foolish human's compassion could accomplish what centuries of neglect had nearly undone. The Sovereign's crown appeared on their sensors, still surrounded by corporate salvage vessels. But those ships seemed insignificant now compared to the magnitude of what they were attempting. They weren't just saving one creature. They were preserving a legacy that stretched back to the dawn of galactic civilization. And maybe, just maybe, they were creating the foundation for a partnership that could help both species face the challenges of an uncertain future. The return to the Sovereign's crown revealed a tense situation that had developed during their absence. The corporate salvage vessels had been joined by 2 additional ships, one flying the colors of the Galactic Science Consortium, the other belonging to what recognized as a private military company. "The situation has escalated," Morin observed as they approached the ancient derelict. "It appears word has spread about our Sovereign's existence." Opened a communication channel to the lead corporate vessel. "This is aboard the Lucky Strike. What's the status of the creature aboard the derelict?" "Mister, this is Doctor from the Science Consortium," came the reply. "We've been monitoring the entity's vital signs. I'm afraid its condition has deteriorated significantly during your absence. Without immediate intervention, it may not survive another 48 hours." Felt his stomach drop. They had risked everything to get the quantum crystals, only to return and find their window of opportunity closing. "We have medical supplies that might help," said carefully. "Request permission to board and assist." "Negative," came a new voice, harsh and authoritative. "This is Colonel Martinez, Terran Defense Solutions. The creature has been classified as a potential biological weapon. No unauthorized personnel will be allowed access." Recognized the name. Terran Defense Solutions was a mercenary outfit that specialized in asset acquisition for clients who couldn't operate through official channels. If they were involved, it meant someone very wealthy wanted the Star Sovereign for their own purposes. "The creature is dying," protested. "Whatever threat you think it poses, it won't matter if it's dead." "Our clients are willing to accept that risk," Colonel Martinez replied coldly. Cut the connection and turned to Morin. "Ideas." The old was studying the tactical display with the eye of someone who had once served in a military that ruled half the galaxy. "The mercenaries have positioned themselves to control all approaches to the derelict. Their ship is heavily armed, designed for combat rather than salvage operations. A direct assault would be suicide." "Then we don't go direct," said. "My ship still has docking codes for the Sovereign's crown. The maintenance bays on the far side are too small for their vessels to monitor effectively. And if they detect our approach," smiled grimly, "then we find out how good human pilots really are when their backs are against the wall." The approach took 2 hours of careful maneuvering through the debris field that surrounded the ancient ship. Had spent years learning to pilot through dangerous terrain, and he used every trick he knew to stay hidden from the mercenary sensors. Meanwhile, their passenger was growing weaker by the hour. The Star Sovereign had roused itself when the quantum crystals were brought aboard, sensing the presence of the food it desperately needed. But the effort of maintaining consciousness was clearly draining what little strength it had left. "We need to get those crystals integrated into its system immediately," Morin said as they monitored the creature's vital signs. "The process is complex, but I believe I remember enough of the procedure to guide you." "Guide me?" asked. "The integration requires direct physical contact with the Sovereign's neural clusters," Morin explained. My people developed techniques for this thousands of years ago, but they were designed for physiology. Your hands are smaller, more dexterous. You'll be able to reach connection points that I cannot. Looked at the massive creature coiled in the cargo hold. The idea of making direct physical contact with its nervous system was both terrifying and humbling. What exactly does that involve? You'll need to place the quantum crystals at specific points along the sovereign's spine, then use directed neural impulses to activate its absorption mechanism. The process creates a direct mental link between you and the creature. You'll experience its memories, its emotions, its entire existence as if they were your own. Considered this. He had already felt brief touches of the Star Sovereign's mind, and those had been overwhelming enough. A full neural link might leave him permanently changed. But looking at the dying creature, he knew he had no choice. They had come too far to fail now. "Tell me what to do," he said. The docking procedure went smoothly, with bringing his ship into one of the Sovereign's crown's smaller maintenance bays. The bay was barely large enough for the lucky strike, but it provided concealment from the mercenary vessels. Getting the Star Sovereign aboard the ancient ship required careful coordination. The creature was weak but cooperative, understanding that this was its best chance for survival. Morin had modified a cargo sled to support the Sovereign's massive weight, and they were able to transport it to the familiar chamber where had first encountered it. The chamber had been partially repaired since the corporate team's investigation. Someone had replaced the damaged bioluminescent panels and cleared away most of the intrusive scanning equipment. Suspected doctor had been responsible. She seemed like the type of scientist who would respect the creature's needs. "The integration chamber is deeper in the ship," Morin explained as they settled the Star Sovereign into its familiar environment. "It was designed specifically for the bonding process between sovereigns and their vessels. If we can reach it, the procedure will be much safer." But getting there meant traveling through sections of the ship that were actively monitored by the Science Consortium. They would need a distraction. Activated his suit's communication system and contacted his sister's ship. "Sarah, I need a favor." "You're supposed to be staying away from that derelict," Admiral replied. "What are you doing?" "Saving a life, but I need those mercenaries distracted for about an hour. Can you create some kind of official emergency that requires their attention?" "I can't interfere with a legitimate security operation," Sarah said, but her tone suggested she was thinking about it. What if it wasn't interference? What if it was a genuine emergency inspection? Those mercenaries are operating in a sector with active military operations. Surely that requires some kind of verification. There was a long pause. "You're asking me to abuse my authority to help you with some kind of illegal alien contact." "I'm asking you to do a routine inspection that happens to coincide with a humanitarian medical procedure," corrected. Another pause, then a sigh. "1 hour, that's all I can give you, and when this is over, you're going to explain everything." "Deal." 20 minutes later, Admiral's flagship began broadcasting official demands for the mercenary vessels to submit to inspection. Colonel Martinez protested loudly, but military law was clear. Active operations in contested space required proper authorization and documentation. While the mercenaries were distracted by the military inspection, and Morin moved the Star Sovereign deeper into the ship. The integration chamber was located near the vessel's center, in a section that had once been the heart of the ship's living systems. The chamber itself was a work of art. Curved walls covered in intricate carvings surrounded a central platform that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Crystalline formations grew from the floor and ceiling, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This is where the original bonding took place," Morin said with reverence. "Where the first Star Sovereign joined with a vessel to create something greater than either could be alone." The Star Sovereign responded to the chamber's presence, its scales brightening for the first time in days. The creature could sense the history of this place, the echoes of its own kind who had the same process ago. "The quantum crystals must be placed at 7 specific neural junction points," Morin explained, indicating locations along the Sovereign's massive spine. "Each crystal must be activated in sequence, creating a cascade reaction that will allow the creature to properly metabolize the quantum energy." Approached the first neural cluster, a region where the Sovereign's scales had a different pattern and texture. When he placed his hand on the designated spot, he felt a jolt of electricity that seemed to travel up his arm and into his brain. Suddenly, he was no longer human salvager. He was something vast and ancient, floating through space with thoughts that moved like music and emotions that spanned. He felt the joy of the first bonding, the harmony of working in partnership with smaller but brilliant creatures who built beautiful ships around his body. The first quantum crystal slid into place with a satisfying click, and felt the Star Sovereign's hunger begin to ease ever so slightly. But the process was far from complete. The second neural cluster brought different memories, the sorrow of watching partner after partner age and die while he remained unchanged. The loneliness of drifting through empty space, searching for others of his kind who had mostly vanished into legend. By the third crystal, was struggling to maintain his own identity. The Star Sovereign's memories were so vast, so overwhelming, that his human consciousness felt like a drop of water in an ocean. He could feel himself beginning to dissolve into the creature's ancient experiences. "Focus on the present," Morin's voice came as if from a great distance. "Remember who you are and why you're here." Grabbed onto that advice like a lifeline. He was here to save a life. The memories flowing through him were not his own, no matter how vivid and compelling they seemed. The fourth and fifth crystals brought images of the nexus of storms and the nursery where young sovereigns still grew. Saw through ancient eyes the careful cultivation of quantum crystal gardens, the patient teaching of cosmic harmonies to eager pupils. But he also saw the gradual decline, food sources depleting, partnerships ending, the slow extinction of a species that had once been the guardians of galactic civilization. The sixth crystal brought rage, not the Star Sovereign's rage, but his own. He was furious at a universe that could allow such magnificent creatures to slowly starve while lesser beings squabbled over territory and profit. The injustice of it burned in his mind like acid. "Control yourself," Morin warned. "Strong emotions can damage the integration process." Forced himself to breathe, to center his thoughts on the task at hand. There was only one crystal left, and the Star Sovereign was already showing signs of improvement. Its breathing was stronger, its scales brighter, its mental emanations more focused. The final neural cluster was different from the others. When placed his hand on it, he felt not memories but possibilities, futures that might unfold if the integration was successful. He saw Star Sovereigns working alongside human ships, their combined abilities opening up regions of space that had been impossible to explore. He saw partnerships based on mutual respect and understanding rather than dominance and submission. And he saw hope, the possibility that this ancient species might not only survive but thrive in an age when the galaxy needed their wisdom more than ever. The last quantum crystal clicked into place, and the transformation was immediate. The Star Sovereign's entire body began to glow with inner fire as the quantum energies spread through its system. The creature's breathing deepened, its movements became more fluid, its mental voice grew strong and clear. Felt the connection between them stabilize into something permanent but not overwhelming. He remained himself, but he now carried a piece of the Star Sovereign's consciousness, and it carried a piece of his. "The integration is complete," Morin announced, his scanner showing readings that made him smile for the first time in days. "The Sovereign's life signs are stabilizing. The immediate crisis has passed." Staggered back from the creature, his mind reeling from the experience. The neural link had left him fundamentally changed. He could sense the Star Sovereign's emotions, feel its gratitude and affection, understand its ancient wisdom in ways that transcended language. But more importantly, he could feel the creature's renewed sense of purpose. The Star Sovereign was no longer just surviving. It was ready to live again, to forge new partnerships and protect the secrets of its species. "We did it," said, hardly believing it himself. "We actually saved it." "You saved it," Morin corrected. "Your courage and compassion made this possible. The Sovereign will remember this for the rest of its very long life." The Star Sovereign lifted its great head and looked directly at. Its golden eyes held depths of gratitude that no words could express. Then it began to sing, not the desperate call for help that it first heard, but a song of joy and renewed hope. The music filled the chamber and spread throughout the ship. It was a song of gratitude, of partnership, of possibilities yet to be explored. And as the melody washed over them, felt something he had never experienced before, the absolute certainty that he had found his true purpose in life. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we prepare for the difficult negotiations," Morin replied. "The science consortium will want to study our sovereign. The mercenaries will try to claim it as a weapon. Your military will demand explanations. And somewhere out there, corporations are already calculating the profit potential of star-sovereign partnerships." Looked at the magnificent creature that had trusted him with its life. The integration process had created a permanent bond between them. He would always be able to sense the star sovereign's well-being, and it would always know when he needed help. "Then we'd better make sure they understand what they're dealing with," said. "This isn't just an alien creature or a potential weapon. This is a person, a being with rights and dignity and of wisdom to share." The star sovereign's song grew stronger, joined by distant echoes from the nexus of storms. Somewhere in the chaotic depths of that anomaly, other sovereigns had heard the song of their rescued kin and were adding their voices to the celebration. For the first time in 3 centuries, the star sovereign was not alone. And thanks to the courage of a foolish human who dared to care about a dying alien, the galaxy had a chance to forge a partnership that could benefit all species for generations to come. But first, they had to survive the political storm that was about to break over their heads. Admiral's distraction wouldn't last much longer, and when the various factions discovered what had been accomplished in the integration chamber, the real battle would begin. Checked his equipment and prepared for the fight of his life. He had saved the Star Sovereign from starvation, but now he would have to protect it from something far more dangerous, the greed and fear of civilized beings who saw opportunity where they should see wonder. The song of the Star Sovereign continued to echo through the ancient ship, a sound of hope in a galaxy that had forgotten how to nurture its most magnificent inhabitants. And in that song, heard the promise of adventures yet to come. The confrontation began exactly as had expected. Within minutes of the Star Sovereign's song reaching the other ships, every faction surrounding the Sovereign's crown was demanding explanations, access, and control over what they saw as an unprecedented discovery. "Mister, you will surrender the alien entity immediately." Colonel Martinez's voice crackled over the comm. "Terran Defense Solutions has been contracted to secure this asset for legitimate research purposes." "Asset?" replied, his voice heavy with disgust. "That asset is a sentient being with more intelligence and wisdom than your entire mercenary company combined." Admiral's voice cut through the argument. "All vessels, this is Admiral Sarah of the Human Space Force. You are ordered to stand down while we assess the situation." "Admiral, with respect, this is a civilian matter," Doctor interjected. "The Science Consortium has priority research claims on any discoveries in this sector." Looked at Morin, who was monitoring the communications with grim amusement. "Your species certainly excels at turning every situation into a territorial dispute," he observed. "It's one of our less admirable traits," admitted. "But we also excel at finding creative solutions when our backs are against the wall." The Star Sovereign had been listening to the heated exchanges, its newly strengthened mental abilities allowing it to understand the various languages being spoken. Felt a wave of concern flow from the creature, not fear for itself, but worry about the conflicts its revival had sparked. "It's not your fault," said aloud, placing his hand on the Sovereign's scales. "Humans have a talent for making everything complicated." Through their neural link, felt the Star Sovereign's response, a mix of sadness and hope. The creature had lived through the rise and fall of civilizations before. It understood that every species went through growing pains as they learned to interact with others on a galactic scale. "There may be a way to resolve this," Morin said thoughtfully, "but it will require trust from all parties, and humans are not known for their trusting nature." "What do you have in mind?" "The sovereign protocols," Morin replied. "Ancient laws that governed interactions between star sovereigns and other species. If we can convince your people to recognize these protocols, it would establish legal frameworks that protect the sovereign's rights while allowing for beneficial cooperation." Felt a spark of hope, but also skepticism. These protocols were law. Why would human authorities accept alien legal precedents? "Because," Morin smiled, "the protocols were developed jointly by 12 different species, including early human explorers who encountered sovereigns in the Outer Rim territories. Your own ancestors helped write these laws." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Humanity had known about star sovereigns centuries ago, before the Great Expansion Wars had consumed everyone's attention. Somewhere in the vast archives of human space, legal documents existed that could protect the creature they had saved. Can you prove this? The proof is in the sovereign's own memory, Morin explained. Every star sovereign carries within itself the complete history of its species' interactions with other races. Our friend here can provide testimony that would stand up in any court of law. The star sovereign stirred, understanding the conversation despite the linguistic barriers. Through the neural link, felt the creature accessing its ancient memories, searching through of experiences for the specific information they needed. What it shared made his eyes widen in amazement. Images flowed through his consciousness, scenes of early human explorers working alongside star sovereigns to map dangerous regions of space, diplomatic negotiations where his ancestors sat at the same table as nobles and other alien representatives, the careful crafting of laws designed to protect both the sovereigns and the species they worked with. This is incredible, breathed. Why was this knowledge lost? Wars have a way of erasing inconvenient history, Morin replied sadly. When conflicts begin, the first casualties are often the voices of cooperation and understanding. Activated his ship's communication system and broadcast on an open channel to all the vessels surrounding the derelict. Attention all ships. I'm transmitting legal documentation that I believe will resolve our current dispute. These are the sovereign protocols, established by the Galactic Cooperation Treaty of 2387. Under these protocols, star sovereigns are recognized as sovereign entities with the right to choose their own partnerships and affiliations. The silence that followed was deafening. Could imagine the various faction leaders scrambling to verify the documents he was transmitting, records pulled directly from the star sovereign's perfect memory and translated into modern legal language by Morin's expertise. Admiral was the first to respond. These documents appear to be authentic. If they're legitimate, they would take precedence over current salvage and research laws. They're legitimate, Sarah. I can guarantee it. How can you possibly guarantee the authenticity of 400-year-old legal documents? Doctor demanded. Looked at the star sovereign, drawing strength from their connection. Because I have a witness who was there when they were signed. Someone who remembers every word, every intent, every promise made during those negotiations. That's impossible, Colonel Martinez scoffed. No being lives that long. The star sovereign you've been calling an asset was present during the original treaty negotiations, explained. It carries within its memory the complete record of humanity's first contact with its species, and under the laws our own ancestors helped write, it has the right to choose its own destiny. The star sovereign began to sing again, but this time the melody was different. The song carried the weight of history, the echo of voices from a dozen different species all working together toward a common goal. It was a song of cooperation, of shared purpose, of the kind of unity that had once made the galaxy a more hopeful place. As the music spread across the calm channels, something remarkable happened. The argument stopped. For a few precious moments, every person listening was caught up in a vision of what the galaxy could be when different species worked together instead of competing for dominance. I've the documents, Admiral announced when the song ended. They check out against historical archives. The sovereign protocols are legitimate binding law. Which means what exactly? Colonel Martinez asked, though his voice had lost much of its aggressive edge. It means the star sovereign gets to choose, said. It can work with the Science Consortium if it wants to advance research. It can assist Terran defense solutions if it believes military applications serve a greater good. It can partner with independent salvagers like me if it prefers freedom of operation. Or it can choose none of us and return to the Nexus of Storms to live with its own kind. Through the neural link, felt the star sovereign considering its options. The creature was grateful for his rescue, but it wasn't bound to him by obligation. The decision would be made based on what the sovereign believed would best serve the future of both species. Images flowed between them, not memories this time, but possibilities. Saw potential futures where star sovereigns worked alongside human exploration vessels, their unique abilities opening up new regions of space for peaceful colonization. He saw research partnerships that advanced understanding of quantum physics and space-time manipulation. He saw the gradual healing of old wounds between species that had once been enemies. But he also saw the darker possibilities. Sovereigns used as weapons, exploited for their abilities.